Jason Lee is from Montreal. Very dynamic player, but not a lot of experience. But still a very good player. Lots of talent. Um, Jason starts AEEORTZ. I expect Zoe A to open fairly quickly. And indeed it does. Very useful word in Scrabble. A Z and four vowels. Very, very useful. EEFGLNO for Conrad. I expect him to play Fog. I don't think there's. Oh, he can play Lozenge as well. Well, Lozenge is much more likely, even though the F is not a good tile. It scores a lot more, keeps about equivalent leave. I expect Lozenge. Yep. Jason draws a bingo. I don't expect him to miss it. He does. So Jason has a semi-unusual bingo. It's the word Prutov. I'm pretty sure it's good. I would be shocked if it's not. It is. Happens. Again, this is the end of the tournament. Lots and lots of pressure, lots of mistakes. I have a feeling Jason would not have missed that in another situation. If you're Conrad, you need these sorts of things to win the tournament. It absolutely is essential. You will not win the tournament without your opponent making some errors. It can really save you a lot of times too. It's part of the game. Especially when it's this late and this high profile of a tournament. AEFIJLT, Taj, like an O for Jetfoil, but Jill and Jilt, probably not. Probably just going to take the points. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm guessing he's just going to play Taj. And indeed, he does. LOORRTX. Normally you'd want to try to figure out something to set up. Pretty hard to do it here. I guess you can play like Root, but that's kind of gross. Kind of looks like a setup too. Not very good. You could play Rodel in the same spot, I guess. Not a lot of good options. OX, like obvious, but the leave is terrible. Toro over here. I'm gonna guess he just plays OX. I don't really like OX. I would probably play Toro. I'm not happy about it. But lots of really bad options. I can't really fault either of those plays, or probably any play he makes. He plays OX. Horrible leave, but not very many good options. AEFGILL. You can play Ling and set up his F, but he's also setting up an S. So probably not. You can play Flag over here. Or you can play Fial over here. That's probably the play. Feal. You can set up EL here, but it's probably just not worth it. I think he's going to play Fial. He does. Horrible rack for, unsurprisingly, but a very bad rack. And all of a sudden, a game that Jason Lee looked to be control of and probably would have been control enough to prove to us is now gone horribly wrong. Yeah, pretty horribly wrong. You play Lotto. It's 23, but it keeps 2 R's. I could still play a Rodel, but not what he's going for. Trot, I guess, keeps ALR. That's probably the play, but not happily. And is there any 9s or something that through HE? I don't think so. Other, alt-other. Nope. Yeah. I expect him to play Trot. Oh, he plays Rotator. I actually missed that. That's actually better. Yeah, that's definitely better. That's a pretty good parallel play. I missed that. I missed that. You could have also played Orator. This is probably better, though. Yeah, I saw Lotto and just kind of gave up on it. CEGIILM. Not a lot of good options. MiG, probably SIG is better over here. You can play MiG over here, but it's not really a point to that. Needs to get rid of a C, either the C or the G, preferably the G. Needs to get rid of, an I. Logic is an option as well. 22 versus 21. Gets rid of this spot. Keeps a worse leave. Pretty close. I'm fine with either one. Conrad goes with SIG. Perfectly understandable. Probably best. Either that or Logic. I don't really have a problem with either one. AIILNTW for Jason. Again, not very clear. Does want to get rid of the W and at least one I. I could play Withe. It's not terrible, but only scores 15. You could play Law, but that keeps an I. You could play Twin or Twain over here. Let's see. That's 10, 16, 25 or 24. Twin is probably the play. I think that's what he's going to go with. He plays Twain. That's fine too. The A is helpful. LI is kind of problematic. The A helps it out a little bit. Doesn't offer, this offers some plays starting with vowels that are not too ideal, such as LME, which Conrad has, but doesn't necessarily want to play. Yeah, too many vowels for Conrad, obviously. If he played Logic, this would obviously be a lot worse. Could play Olio, not really. LME, which is an option. He wished that the flat weren't there. He could play Oinomel. Uri, he could play Loom. Those both keep 3 vowels. That's not good. I would probably go with LME, but it's pretty close. I'm not like, wouldn't be surprised if he plays something else. And he goes with Uri. Jason draws very well. He draws the blank and the S. Things could become a problem. You do want to, if you're going to bingo, you probably want to hook this S and go up. It's probably the type of board you want to create. Yeah, probably just something like Valis's or Glaives. Glaives is probably the play. Leaves a G, which is not a very good tile. But playing over here creates a right angle here, so this quadrant is going to be a lot harder to do anything with. Blocks both of the 7-letter lines above and below Uri. Does a really good job of really shutting down the board really well. So I think that's definitely the positional play. Unless there's something, through this hooking the N, but I don't think there is. So I'd go with Glaives. Jason plays Valines, which almost as good. So Conrad's now down over 100 with not a very good rack. And this is kind of where the pressure probably starts to really, really come in. This is a very, very costly game. A lot more for Conrad, even though Jason loses, he's out. Jason still needs to win all of his games and still probably needs some help. Conrad does not. Yeah. So at this point, Conrad needs to create some lanes. Because Jason's just shut down almost the entire board. There's only 2 A's left. So he could make some, and only 2 O's left, so he could like gamble it all right now and play men and hope Jason doesn't have a hook. That being said, you never, as a top player, you learn very quickly you never want to gamble it all like that unless you really have to, and he doesn't really have to yet. But there's a huge upside. I mean, if he has a lot of tiles he can hit. There's 4 Ds, 4 Es for eagle-eyed and ligated. If he hits a U, he might get ligulate. He might get to fish next turn even if he misses. Probably lots of other tiles too. S's, N's. And he wants the side of the board open for sure. So he can definitely consider it. Another play that does something similar is Magi. Since there's only 2 A's, it's not likely this is going to get overlapped. And when it's not overlapped, this is a very good bingo line with LET. Yeah. There are safer ways to open bingo lines as well. Egal over here. You don't want to play Magi here because that doesn't open anything. You need to open something. Maybe Vig over here, but there are 3 S's. You don't have any of them. Yeah, I would want something opening. Conrad does not play plays like this very often. Conrad does not like variance, and this is the epitome of variance. This is the game. If he plays this, and it misses, he's in all sorts of trouble. But if it hits, he's definitely right back in it. And any other play, if he, it's something in between. You can't even really block it. Can you block it if he's... You can kind of block it if you don't have it. There's a P and an F for that. It's annoying. I probably wouldn't go for this. It's a little too dangerous. I'd probably go with Magi. Opening this up. Unlikely he has an A or a C. Pretty hard to block if he doesn't. If he wants to make a 8-point play down here, that's fine. I can still have other options. Although really that wouldn't be a bad option if he did that. I guess I would be a little bit concerned if that ended up happening. I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know. Conrad plays Glom. Glom keeps AEIT, which isn't my favorite type of leave, but then again, this is, it's a volatile situation. He does keep anti-words, and keeps words to the L, so I guess that's okay. But you get the same sort of situation, the rat can die. And if it dies, it's a very rough death. It's probably not going to get back if the rat dies. Going to have a hard time regardless. Jason draws both A's, so obviously men would not have worked. He wants to create bingo line. He wants to block bingo lines, and he wants to create scoring lines. That's generally what you want to do on this board, at this score especially. Horde does a tremendous job of that. This is a great scoring line and a terrible bingo line. I would imagine that's what he's playing. He could play Doe, I guess. There are other options, but I think Horde's best by a mile. Yeah, I don't see any other options. He plays guard. Guard sets up HO. I'm not a fan. I think you want to score immediately. I think that the scoring spot it creates, especially when Conrad is trying to bingo, is ginormous. I think that you need to play Horde here, and then try to hit something overlapping it. If he bingos. It's not a big deal. Conrad draws very well, which he needed to. AEINRTU. Only one bingo, I believe. Antlier, is that it? Yeah. Jason draws the blank, and this game's over. Yeah. Even if he doesn't find a bingo this turn, and I think there might be one, it's going to be almost impossible for Conrad to come back now. Yeah. Definitely wants to take this out. Almost has non-hardy, but not quite. If you can play Honey, it's probably the best play to take everything out. Hoyden is also possible. Create the scoring spot, which is again good for him. He also has the last A. Yeah, the pool is terrible. It's going to be almost impossible for Conrad to come back here. He plays Honey, which is fine. It does create a P hook and it does create parallels, but not that much of an issue. I actually feel for Conrad more than most people. Conrad lost the last game. Conrad was 20-6 last game. I was 21-5 last year, so I'm in a kind of similar situation. I did not win a game after I started 21-5. I went 21-10. Drew basically nothing. Could have played a little bit better, but I drew absolutely nothing. And that can happen. Tiles can go, tiles can swim your way for a little while, and then tiles can absolutely disappear. And this is a game where the tiles for Conrad are absolutely disappearing. There is nothing he is getting. And he has an S. He's not going to be able to do anything with it. He's going to play something that may or may not, yeah, it's not going to work probably. Play a king here. At least he keeps a lead when he does that. It's not going to hit anything. Can play Mew here, but he has no lanes, and he has to draw another E probably. But at least he keeps in range, and at least he blocks the scoring spot, so that's probably the play. You could play Ken, I guess. But you don't want to keep M and W. You'd rather just keep a K. He plays Mew. He has A, B, D, E, I, R blank, and he's way, way ahead at this point. He doesn't have a bingo yet. You can't rebraid or anything like that. At this point, the pool is very, very terrible, and Jason has a very significant lead. And he doesn't really need spread or anything like that, so he really just needs to play as safely as possible. Just assume he's going to draw, the Q, the V, and everything else, and try to win anyway. So generally, you don't want to play too many tiles here. You don't want the propensity of drawing really, really badly. When you're a heavy favorite, you always want to assume that you're going to draw as badly as possible. So, I'm leaning towards something like, maybe just drop the B here and try to hit bingo next turn. Yeah, maybe you can consider playing Dib, I guess. That does keep an S hook, but if you look at this pool, what is he going to have? I guess he could bingo somehow, but if he bingos, he's going to have a terrible, terrible, terrible rack. The score will be tied, and you're going to have AER blank. So it's really not that bad of a scenario at all. Because even if you draw, Q, V, whatever, and then your opponent bingos, you're still going to probably win the game almost all of the time. Maybe not all the time, but very, very often. Yeah, the key is you just don't want anything really, really bad to happen. And yeah. Jason plays Rabid. It does score the most, and it does keep ER blank, which is really, really good, obviously, but it does have some scare factor with, bingos over here and really bad draws. Even then, you're still probably fine, but I'm okay with it. I probably wouldn't have played it, but it's definitely reasonable. Conrad has not very good. EKNQRSY. There's only 7 vowels in the pool from his perspective. And not very good options. He could exchange, but why? If he keeps ENRS, there's probably not going to be a bingo line next turn to hit, so it's not really as good as it might otherwise be, at least. He does have to get rid of the Q. Unfortunately, the only way to do that is to play QI over here. QI over there is, blocks the last line, keeps a not very good leave, and doesn't really have any point to it. You still can draw the U, and Conrad does need to draw well to win this game. Yeah, not many other options. He doesn't want to make it easy for Jason. He wants to make it at least as difficult as possible. He could play like a can or something like that, but he needs to address the Q at some point. That means either drawing a significant number of tiles, trading the Q, or doing something. And he needs to address the openness of the board. He needs to at least address one of those. And since he can't address the Q unless he exchange, and that's not a very good option, he needs to create another line and hopefully score some points too. He plays Psyche, S-Y-K-E. I definitely agree. He opens 2 bingo lines. Does force him to eat the Q, but you might be able to exchange the Q next turn. You might draw the U. There's no reason to think that Jason has the U at this point. Just at least it gives him a chance. So I definitely agree. He can also draw the blank. He has no reason to know that Jason has the blank at this point. E-I-I-P-R-U blank for Jason. Again, no bingo. Plenty of bingo lines. He doesn't have to open anything else, and he wouldn't want to even if he could. He could make it even more open by playing something like Kip. Again, you want to look for the worst draws. So if you don't keep the U, the Q becomes a very, very bad tile. If you do keep the U, the V is probably the worst tile. That being said, it's not, the V and the U together is not nearly as bad as the Q without the U. And considering that there are no other options, and considering that if you don't draw the Q and your opponent hits something, they're going to draw the Q, which basically gives you a free ride. So I would definitely lead towards keeping the U if you could. So yeah, I would lean towards either playing Kip or playing PI for that reason. PI does leave this hook over here, but it's pretty safe. It leaves QIS too, but that's not likely to score enough at all. QIS is going to be QIS's worst case, and that's 47. So you're going to be down by, let's see, you're going to be down by 8. The Q is going to be gone. You're going to have EIRU blank plus 2 tiles in a pool that's very consonant heavy. Your opponent will have used one of the I's. One of the S's will be gone. You'll probably end up just bingoing. And even if you don't, you can bingo next turn. You could outscore them very easily just by dropping the R here. You're going to put yourself in a very advantageous position. Worst case with Kip is that he bingos to the P, and then you might be in some trouble, especially if you don't bingo, or especially if the bingo scores a lot. So I would prefer PI here. Jason plays Europies. Europis is good, and Europi is good. EURIPI takes a US, but so Conrad challenges it fairly quickly. Yeah. Very, very easy to do that when you're under a lot of pressure. Jason's not exactly that experienced as it is, and this is a much more important game than he's probably ever played before. So Conrad has CNNQRSV. Not a very good rack, obviously. He knows what Jason has, so he also knows what the pool is. The pool is, let's see, B, D, D, E, F, I, O, S. So he needs to draw out of this pool. He can't even think about playing here. He has to exchange. He now knows there's no U for him to draw, and he can't hold on to the Q, and he can't play QI because he's not going to win. Q has to go for sure. V has to go for sure. R on the S definitely has to stay in his rack. And it's all about what can you hit that actually plays. So first of all, you want to try to figure out what Jason's going to play. Again, since we know Jason's rack and we analyzed it last turn, he's probably going to play PI or maybe PIU or something like that. Probably something with Plex. It would be very surprising if he played something else. Maybe he could play over here, but I would expect him to be keeping EIR or EIRU or something like that. We need to draw vowels. We need to draw at least 2 of the E, I, and O, at least. If we don't do that, we're dead. So we also need to trade at least one of the N's. So the only question is, how many of CNRS do we keep, and why? Now, at first it's going to seem pretty obvious. You don't want to keep the C, especially since keeping CRS, it doesn't hit very many things over here. And this can just be blocked. Although this is much harder to block than you think, and it's very unlikely he's actually going to block it next turn. So I think the best way to think of this position in general is to assume that you draw 2 vowels and try to figure out what you're actually going to draw. You're definitely going to keep the R and the S. Yeah, the R is just way too useful. The R is definitely the best bingo consonant, and it definitely works well with the pool as well. And there's only one of them. Whereas even though there's 2 N's, you may get more than one turn to draw, and you might end up with duplicate N's. It's a small factor, but it does impact why you should keep an R over an N here. The key is, what can you hit if you play, yeah, what can you hit otherwise? One good reason to keep the N is that being able to play on this spot, you basically need to draw the B or you need to draw the S. And with both of those draws, it's much, much better to keep the N over the C. The C is not going to go over here, and the C is generally going to be something that starts words. It's another reason why not to keep the C in general. C is not going to go in either of these locations. And it's pretty hard to see what you can draw. There are some things, but most of them actually will play anyway. For example, if you draw Ebonics over here, you could just draw, if you had the C instead of the N, you could just hit, let's see, Ebonics with this instead of the C, you have the N. You could hit, Benison. I guess that's not a good example because you're not keeping one of those tiles, but yeah, you could hit binders. You could hit all sorts of things that start with the B. There's almost nothing that starts with the B and that has the C. There might not be anything at all, actually. Yeah. You could hit like red fins or finders. That's going to not hit the C. It's really just hard. You have to figure out what bingos you're going to hit with the C that play. And yes, you could hit something like rescinds, but if you hit rescind, you'd hit endrins or dinners. If you hit, scorned, you'd have dawners. If you hit, yeah, it's just really hard to figure out what you're going to actually hit. I guess you could hit like discord or something like that. Yeah, but it's just not nearly as many options. CD works less well than ND, and C and B don't work well together, and C and F don't work together. So you don't really want to keep the C here. And the C isn't going to start words, whereas the N potentially could. Something like nodders or something like that. So yeah, I prefer keeping the N here. You can also keep neither of them. That does increase the odds of you drawing a vowel, and you could redraw the N, which is actually a pretty significant factor here. It may not seem to be that ideal to get rid of an N because the N is going to probably be the third best tile in this pool, but it does make it much more likely that you'll draw a vowel. And that's really what you need. Even if you draw badly otherwise, if you have BDDIORS or something like that, at least you know what you need to hit now. And you can fish accordingly. Whereas if you only hit one vowel, you're pretty much screwed. I think it's pretty close. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. We can actually run computer simulation. It's actually really, really good in this case because you know exactly what your opponent has. This is one of the rare times when I actually care what the computer thinks, because the computer is going to be able to tell you exactly how often you bingo next turn. And then we can go over here and really we're just looking at bingo percentage. We don't care about anything else. So we're just looking at this number over here. So we'll wait a minute and see what it gives us. But yeah, and bingo percentage next turn is going to pretty closely correlate with next turn, although not precisely. And because of that, RS is going to be a little bit worse. The simulation is going to say that RS is a little bit worse than it actually is. But so if it's nearly tied, then you should keep RS. Just because it's not going to, we're only looking at bingo percentage. So, if they're almost tied, then yeah, go with RS. If it's NRS is pretty significantly better, then you should go with it. So this probably isn't long enough, but we'll get a pretty good idea. So RS is 11.8. And RS is significantly better in terms of bingo percentage. So yeah, I guess keeping RS is almost definitely the play here. And by quite a lot, actually. You can see that the next best is going to be interestingly, it's keeping C and S, but yeah, you do care about future turns as well. So definitely keeping RS is probably better. I thought it might be. I thought I probably would have done that. I didn't realize to the extent, however. So yeah, Conrad kept NRS. I think that's definitely reasonable. Jason has the same position. He ends up playing Pew fairly quickly, actually. Again, you already know my thoughts. I prefer PI. My Quackle is old. Conrad does not draw the second vowel that he needs. So again, the same pool applies. Well, not the same pool. So he knows what the pool is until Jason drew. So he traded CNQV, and he drew FODD, so BEIS. So that's when the pool is from Conrad's perspective. BCEINBSQ. And he needs to draw vowels really bad. So ideally, he'd like to play off three, three consonants and give himself the best chances he can to draw a vowel. And unfortunately, the only real way of doing that is playing Fend, and that's gross because of how badly it destroys the board. And because he knows that Jason has the blank, so if Jason draws the Q, he has Kaids or quits here automatically. So he can't really do that. Yeah. He knows that Jason still has the Q, so he can't play Def, although he could play Fed. But if he plays Fed, what is he trying to draw? I guess BE. Yeah, this is not a good position at all to be in. He definitely would like to play more tiles than he's going to be able to. He wants to be able to bingo if he draws an I. That's really the key hope. Because you don't want to just put all your hopes on the E. Play Fed, he could play Fud, he could play Fun, he could play Done. If he draws an I, let's say IC or IB. So he plays Done, he could draw Forbids, but that's only going to play in one spot. And it's BI exactly, and not much else he could draw. Now you need to get rid of the F. Again, you have to assume you're going to draw a vowel, and you're going to assume that Jason has drawn the Q at this point, because pretty much if he hasn't drawn the Q, he's bingoing. Maybe he's drawn CQ, but yeah. Or maybe CV, but no, you have to assume he's drawn the Q at this point. Otherwise, you're dead. You can draw something like SE, and you can draw Saunders. Yeah, it's going to be pretty tough. You have to draw the S too. If you drew the S, even if you drew the Q, it's SUQ, and that's just going to kill you. So I'd probably go with Fud over here and trying to draw something. Not happily, but there are still things you can draw that go in multiple spots. Conrad does play Fud. And if you draw EI, of course, you're good. Jason doesn't draw bingo tiles, but he draws more than well enough because he draws the E and the I. And even though this means he can't bingo, it also means Conrad cannot bingo. CDNNOQRSSV is one vowel in the entire pool and a bunch of really ugly tiles. There's also 3 in the bag, and you're also in a position where Conrad is fished. So he's trying to hit something. He doesn't have the Q yet, or he would have played QI last turn. So this puts you in a really good situation because you can fish, maybe even more than once. If you play off, let's say you play BEN, and the Q is still in the bag, Conrad's going to still try to fish. even if he shouldn't. So you can actually play something like BEN if you want. Because even though you're not going to bingo next turn, the odds are very, very good that, or extremely good, that Conrad's going to give you another shot at it. He has no way of knowing for sure, especially given his situation where wins are much more important than spread is. He has no way of knowing for sure that you have all the valves, and he's going to think that he has some chance of winning. So because of that, I actually don't mind Ben at all. That being said, if he does manage to to empty the bag somehow, you're not going to bingo. And maybe he's going to have such a bad rack that he has to hope to hit like EI or E blank or I blank. So maybe that's not necessarily such a good idea. But yeah, B is actually a useful tile because of this spot. So you could just play the R off, or like the I off, for example. And then if you have, and then if you play the I here, then let's see, if you have the C, you're bingoing in 2 spots. The N, obviously. The D, the D bingoes in 2 spots. The O means that he has no vowels. That's not even realistic. He definitely has the R as well, although you could bingo with that. Q obviously is not good. And definitely a possibility. Yeah, I mean, you'd still win by playing Quinn, but that's not ideal. And you'd be giving him forwards. The R, the S, obviously. The V gives you verbile. But you're probably not going to. You might get it. You'll get verbile as long as he doesn't have the Q. Because if he has the Q, he's not. He has the Q, he's not going to block. Or, I mean, if he doesn't have the Q, he's going to try to win by bingoing. Probably. And just hope that you drew the Q. So yeah, it's definitely an option. You also play off 2 tiles. The best play that does that is probably either BE here, BI here. And Jason does play BI. It's okay. It does, again, there's Q risk, but that's not every. You have to take that chance sometimes. Conrad has DNNORSV. And at this point, the Q is in the bag, and you could draw, let's say, the E or the blank or something like that. But even if you draw the blank, you're not in a good shape. And I think at this point, you just have to give up. There's a part of everybody that kind of wants to try to figure out a way to win every single game, regardless of the situation. And while I do sympathize with that to some degree, at some point you do have to worry about spread, and you have to worry about making sure that you putting yourself in positions that you win tournaments. And this doesn't really do that. Trying to hit something, playing off the N or playing off the V, you're leaving your opponent's just going to bingo way too often. Esquire over here, or if they have the Q still in the bag, 8 trillion bingos. Cirques doesn't play, at least. But yeah, you're better off just, saying, okay, you got it. So I would recommend something like Sod. You don't want to play Sun because of Inquires. Yeah. Yeah, and yes, you don't have any options, but so be it. You could also play Avid, try to get spread that way. Maybe O and S even. And then that way at least you keep Avid for next turn. Yeah. Conrad plays again, evidently trying to hit vendors. Maybe he'll think that Jason doesn't have a bingo, and I guess spread isn't that big of a deal for him, but I still would prefer something a little bit more conservative. You can't try to win every game all the time. Sometimes you just gotta admit that you're not gonna win. And Jason bingo's out.